Shabbat Shalom, friends. This week's Parasha takes its name from the Hebrew text of Devarim, Deuteronomy chapter 21, verse 10, where our weekly Parasha starts by stating, Ki Tetzé lamalshama uvbeha. When you go out to war against your enemies, of course on a simple historical and literal level, this refers to certain rules that must be followed in case the Israel of biblical times had to face a military conflict to defend its sovereignty. And as I have always taught you, the Torah has a message for us in the 21st century, but it was not written for us, but for its original recipients in the time and place when it was first written. In this one over there, however, although the historical part is important to know too, we discover that it contains an expression that seems superfluous or unnecessary. And this always catches our attention because we know that nothing in the Torah is insignificant. What we have in our text that seems trivial gives us a clue to assume that we have here an allusion to another kind of war. This can be deduced because if we say when you go to wars, there shouldn't be anything to add about your enemies, since our rational thinking assumes that if we go to war, it's against enemies, not friends. There is no war of death between friends, but between enemies. If that's the case, why does the Torah seem to reinforce the idea that this war is against your enemies, instead of just telling us to go to war, but adding against your enemies? If we connect last week's Parasha with this one, we might find a reference to the type of war the Torah could be referring to in our Parasha today. Remember that last week we were commanded to appoint judges and officers at all our gates. On a simple level, this means establishing a system of justice to govern a country under law and order. But it could also be a reference to an alternative reading of the text at a deeper level, suggesting that each of us is like a city with gates, and these doors can be identified as our eyes, our ears, our hearts, our minds, our lips, etc. And therefore the alternative meaning of the text would be telling us about the care we must take in deciding and selecting what we see. What thoughts do we allow to nest in our minds? What do we listen to? What do we do with our hands? And where do we move with our feet? Once we understand this, if we continue with the figure of the human person as a city, then we must assume that we could be facing enemies trying to destroy our city. In other words, the text might suggest that war here is not only a reference to military conflicts between states and nations, but something much more personal and close to us, our struggle against our vulnerabilities, our battles against the forces of the evil inclination, that which Rabbi Saul of Tarsus described as the law of sin, meaning the law of the Yetzer Hara. The great heroes of our Hebrew faith all had to battle against these forces and strive to overcome them. It says in our books, for example, that the prophet Elisha was a man like us, with our same weaknesses. However, his greatness was that he fought against these forces and managed to overcome them most of the time. This force of the Yetzer Hara is part of our ontological reality. We cannot change that, but we must understand it and know that we are always in an open battle against that which tends to discourage you, to drown you, to take you off the path, to anger and destroy you. So do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. Put to death the forces of bad inclination within you, for you are not under a closed legalistic system, but on a platform of grace, where you choose which of these two forces to follow. This is what our books say. This is what their readings suggest. So the topic of our here to there could legitimately apply not only to the material struggle, but also to the mental and emotional struggle that each of us constantly fights. Someone once said, the mind is your home, and only you decide whether to make it a hell or a paradise. There are people who live battling against real mental, emotional, and spiritual scenarios that do not allow them to grow, develop, move forward, and succeed in life. It is against those scenarios that we have to go to war, as our paradise states. However, when a partner says to us, against your enemies, they are also telling us that each of us has our own specific enemies, your enemies. In other words, my friends, each of us has our own wars to fight, our own battles to win. Each of us has our own internal conflicts, our own vulnerabilities, our own struggles. And the first step to winning your particular battle against those forces that push you back, that want to sabotage your triumphs and take you off the path. The first step is to identify them as what they truly are, a war. A war is defined as a struggle, dispute, clash, fight, conflagration between two parties, two forces, two ideologies, two ways of thinking. The best way to define the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, is to remember that it is an internal conflict we all fight. That conflict you also fight between what you want and what you should, between what you like and what you actually need, between what is allowed and what is forbidden, between what is lawful but not beneficial, even when it is lawful, because it doesn't build. And here lies one of the greatest spiritual secrets to triumph in these internal conflicts that we all experience. Because the text says that when we go to war against our enemies, the Lord your Elohim, the Lord your God, will deliver them into your hands, and you will take your enemies captive. In other words, once you decide to face those forces that block your path, once you decide to face those forces that push you from side to side, once you decide to face and fight against those forces that harass, limit, impoverish, and humiliate you, God will intervene in your favor and start giving you victory over your enemies. And furthermore, you will take those enemies and make them your captives. To the same extent that we are sincere and honest with ourselves and reach a point where we decide to identify our inner enemies and face and overcome them, not letting them rob us of our dignity, not letting them rob you of your spiritual purity, nor continue to humiliate you in your behavior. To that same extent, Shem will come to your aid and help you, and you will subdue those enemies in captivity. In other words, your own weaknesses will become strengths. Your own vulnerabilities will become your best allies. Your own failures will be the springboard for your most extraordinary triumphs, because you will take your enemies into captivity and you will make them work for you now. To put it another way, behind every media trend that tries to bring you down, there's an extraordinary positive force waiting to be unleashed to overcome it. Behind your tendency to lie, for example, to get out of trouble, behind your tendency to get angry and seek revenge, there are extraordinary forces that are oppressed by that bad tendency. When awakened, when uncovered, they will put in your hands abilities and strengths you didn't know you had and will elevate you to heights your eyes have never seen. In other words, there are hidden treasures in your neshama that the forces of the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, hide from you through those bad tendencies. However, when you overcome them, you discover the treasure hidden beneath that bad tendency. Once you understand this, you will see that fighting to remove those forces is what will give you access to the extraordinary arsenal of resources you have within you, and that God Himself had previously breathed into your soul. Every bad tendency you overcome will reveal a treasure that you carry within. But the secret is to take your personal struggle seriously. Don't justify yourself by saying things like, I have this tendency, or I was born with this tendency, or that's just how I am, that's how I feel. Because the moment we take that attitude, we stop going to war against our enemies. Remember, always remember, each of us comes into this world with certain tendencies. Some are good, extraordinary, unique abilities that very few people possess, and you have them. But we also come with bad tendencies, certain desires, certain inclinations, depending on the spiritual root from where we come, through that complicated genetic network involving generations and generations of your ancestors, both paternal and maternal. Be it lying to get by, attraction to the opposite sex, stealing, starting things and never finishing them, intolerant behavior towards your husband or wife, greed, avarice, cruelty, or abuse toward the defenseless. You become aggressive over anything. Live with desires of hate and revenge in your heart. Laziness, selfishness, egocentrism. You become arrogant, prideful, and at the slightest thing, develop attitudes of anger and violence, tendencies and forces similar to this. It is these tendencies, my friends, that hide your greatest abilities and most extraordinary resources. Once you accept the reality and decide to go to war against your enemies, against those negative tendencies that are harming you, holding you back, limiting you, and you sincerely decide to fight those internal enemies and start renewing, cleaning, elevating yourself, becoming a better person, more humane, more like God, a better friend, a better brother, a better husband, a better wife, a better son, a better daughter, a better companion. When you wholeheartedly, resolutely decide to go to war against your enemies, against your destructive tendencies, then God will draw near. God will hear your battle cry. God will come to your aid and give you that helping hand. You need to conquer your city and make your enemies your captives. And how will God do it? Some are waiting for God to send them an angel wrapped in fire from heaven to touch their forehead, and then fall to the ground trembling, and poof, all those tendencies are gone. Others think that there might be some kind of power elixir that you can drink in one gulp and poof, all the bad tendencies are gone immediately. Others think they can go to someone who can say a special prayer and poof, all those tendencies are gone. My friends, this is not how we see that God has helped our biblical heroes overcome their own weaknesses and faults. One of our heroes went to war against his enemies. He did it with all his heart and all his strength. He asked the Eternal to take away that force that constantly hit him, which was like a thorn in his own flesh, sabotaging him all the time. He tells us that 3 times he asked the Eternal to remove that thorn. And 3 times God helped him, and helped him by saying only, "My grace is sufficient for you, because my power is perfected." In weakness, you are fighting against powerful forces that constantly sabotage and humiliate you. You are sincere in that. You ask God for help, and the help comes saying, "My grace is sufficient for you, because my power is perfected in weakness." It is very difficult to understand this unless we grasp what grace means in the Bible and in the Hebrew thought of our biblical heroes. Grace means, my friends, that God is not angry with you for your bad tendencies. He is not angry with you for your faults. God is not angry with you, nor is He looking to punish and humiliate and shame you. God is not there to judge and oppress you. My grace is sufficient for you means that when God sees you are doing your part, that you are not accepting those tendencies in your life, that you do not want them, and you are making your best effort to overcome them, He will give you day by day a portion of strength you need to overcome them, the resources you will need along the way to conquer them. You will elevate your consciousness, you will strengthen your spiritual muscles, you will gradually become a giant, a conqueror. You'll experience His presence, His love, His kindness, accompanying you in your struggle, helping you improve your performance, achieve your goals, and become more perfect. My grace is sufficient for you means He will place someone in your path who will say a word, a phrase, give advice, set an example, give a pat on the shoulder, which will shine like a glory within you, awakening inner strength to help you fight and win that battle. My grace is sufficient for you means that when you least expect it, God will allow you to see something you haven't seen, understand something you haven't understood, become aware of certain events that have gone unnoticed in your life. And suddenly they become like the master key that begins to open new doors. New doors for you until today. Close. My grace is sufficient for you means that God will show you the hidden treasures behind your bad tendencies, and that will act in you as the best motivation for self-improvement to remove those forces and uncover the arsenal of glory that the grace and mercy of God have hidden inside you, and that those bad tendencies have been trying all the time to hide and cover them from you like a camouflage of evil, so that you do not come closer to look and discover the treasure you have within. No more migration. For my power is made perfect in weakness, means that you will put up fences of protection against your bad tendencies. This way, they will lose their appeal and power over you, so your eyes will begin to see the flashes of the spiritual diamond mines you carry within. And those forces try to hide them and distract you so you wouldn't discover them. My grace is sufficient for you means ultimately that even if at one point in your life you can't accumulate enough merits to overcome those bad tendencies, you will still be able to borrow merits from the one who now has the perfect measure of divine resources from which we can draw. Grace upon grace, Yeshua HaMashiach, our Supreme Tzaddik, Oh, great tzaddik, when your strength is dwindling and your merits are not enough, can take a portion of his own and transfer it to you to complete what is missing for your triumph over those bad tendencies. My friends, we are in the 6th month of the biblical yearbook. We are not in September, we are in the prophetic month of Elul. The prophetic paths of God are not revealed in secular months, but in the biblical months. God's economy moves through divine provisions assigned to our times, marked by the biblical yearbook, not by the calendar of the emperors of this world. Elul is the 6th of the 12 months in our Torah yearbook. It is known as the time of repentance, the time of special divine grace, the best opportunity to receive a portion of the glory of divine mercy. Elul is a month designed by God to give you new strength, forgive you, heal you, and grant you a new opportunity more than the rest of the months of the year. It doesn't mean that outside of Elul God's grace isn't available, but it means that in this month in particular, this grace overflows more than in the other months of the year. In Elul, my friends, in the biblical calendar, it follows the months where the greatest sins of Israel took place, the sin of the golden calf and the sin of Lashon Hara, the secret missions against the conquest of the land. This means that Elul is a month where you can get back on your feet after your most crushing falls. Elul signifies that it is a month where you can have another go, even if you have had a couple of disastrous attempts before. All means you can recover from a slump, a setback, a slip-up. Ul, well, as our ancient sages said, is an acronym from the initials of Shir HaShirim, Song of Songs, one of whose text says, Ani ledo dili, I am my beloved's, and my beloved is mine. When the text says, I am my beloved's, you are acknowledging that you belong to God, that you accept your soul belongs to Him, that you accept you are a spark. It is a human being, the divine holiness bestowed upon you. If you also accept that when the text says, and my beloved is mine, you are recognizing that God treats you with love, dignity, mercy, infinite grace, and will show you this grace on the path to war against your enemies, and you will make them prisoners of war, and you will make them your captives. At the end of this month of Elul, the 7th biblical month begins, opening with the festival of Rosh Hashanah and followed by Yom Kippur. Rosh Hashanah is Adam's birthday, marking the moment when Adam was also judged, making this day a judgment day. On Rosh Hashanah, the charges are read. On Yom Kippur, the sentence is passed. And the month of Lul precedes both as a month of forgiveness, as a month of mercy, as a month of special grace for you and your household. I want this reflection on this Parasha to become a time for you to discover the treasures hidden in your soul, and that now might be covered, hidden by the forces of those bad tendencies that have been oppressing you and hitting you in the face. That today you decide to remove them, go to war against all your enemies, and discover that when you take that fighting attitude against them, God comes to your aid. God extends a portion of His grace to you, and you will begin to discover that where you were weak, now you are getting stronger. Where you once felt most vulnerable, now you begin to feel more strength. Where darkness once ruled, now there is light, health, life, joy, hope, and glory. And peace. Happy is the people who understand this. Happy is the people who take hold of this special provision of forgiveness, mercy, and peace that God has for you today. Shabbat Shalom, friends. Shabbat Shalom.